Hello everyone, my name is Simon Mann and I'll be presenting on the article The Whistleblower's Dilemma by Jean Kumigai. So to begin with a little bit of context about this article, we start with the case of Salvador Castro, who was a former employee at Airsods Incorporated, who noticed a flaw in one of the products that the company was releasing. When he then reported this flaw to his supervisor, the company ignored him, and then they resulted in firing him when he threatened to warn the FDA. And so the first thing that the article uses this case to highlight is the negative consequences of speaking out or whistleblowing, which at the most basic level can be getting fired from the job, but can also result in worse things, such as harassment and being blacklisted from that field, disabling the employer from finding another job in that field again. And so the article also discusses how many people make mistakes when whistleblowing, or that they do not go about whistleblowing in the correct manner. The first which being that people trust those around them too much. They stress the importance of remaining anonymous, as not everyone around you is as good of heart and ethical as you are. By remaining anonymous, you can avoid being stopped by supervisors early or having your reputation tarnished in order to diminish your claim. The next point that it makes is to wait and collect data. As we know, evidence is crucial when making a claim. And if insufficient data is presented when reporting, the credibility of both the claim and you can come into question, and thus we should wait and collect as much data as we need before reporting out. And the final call to action that is made by this article is to encourage whistleblowing. That by whistleblowing, we are setting the trend for future generations to also have the courage to speak out against corporations who do wrong. So some of the themes in this article that tie into what we learned in class is first that of risk assessment. Because as we see, the risks of being fired, harassed, and blacklisted are very real outcomes of this situation, which is highlighted in the article, and thus it calls into question whether the risks are worth the action of whistleblowing. The next theme that shows up is that of cost-benefit analysis, where we as the employee consider whether the cost of these risks listed is worth the benefit of alerting the public to the wrongdoing, as this will affect how the public views the company and in turn if they continue to purchase products for them. And thus we should weigh whether the whistleblowing is worthwhile, and if it benefits the public in such a way that we should indeed whistleblow. And so some of the ethical and moral dilemmas that are raised by this article is, first, how to whistleblow in order to effectively call for change while not being shut down in the process or scrutinized preliminarily. The next dilemma that arises is the consequences that we face. As the employee, are we ready to face these consequences? As in an ideal or simply better world, employees should not be facing these repercussions for reporting out. They should be able to trust that they can hold companies accountable for their wrongdoings and not get punished for it. But in this non-ideal world, we need to ask ourselves, are we ready to face these consequences? And then the final dilemma is it worthwhile to whistleblow? And this ties into cost-benefit analysis, but is our whistleblowing going to greatly benefit the public? And thus, should we whistleblow? And so some solutions that the article offers to some of these issues that arise is to first remain anonymous. By remaining anonymous, we can gather important insider data, all while not facing scrutiny or allowing others to stop us from making a claim. The next solution is to wait and collect data. We need sufficient data to not only support our claim, but to add credibility to it and to ourselves. And the last solution is to be careful who we speak to. So we want to remain anonymous when we're gathering data, but when we are ready to report out, we want to ensure that we're reporting to the right person so that we do not get shut down and or threatened. Now in terms of my personal framework, which is that of pragmatism, I would say that my framework indeed supports the arguments made in this article, as it is a practical argument. To gather evidence and report out in a way that does not entirely harm the employee is the practical thing to do. Also, it is the smarter thing to do. It is a smarter way of reporting. By remaining anonymous, we're going to get better data while facing less risks, and so in a practical sense, we would agree with this stance. And this is all while, of course, maintaining our ethics. We're still reporting out, we're notifying the public, which is the right thing to do, but in a way that provides less harm to us. So in terms of if my personal ethical views agree with the arguments made in this article, I would say that they do. As the first point that is sort of brought up is that of accountability, in that companies are not allowed to get away with what they want. We can hold them accountable for when they make mistakes. Another point is that we're fostering trust between client and corporation, that the client can then trust that they are purchasing trustworthy products from a trustworthy company. And then finally, the point of there's going to be a decrease in wrongdoings. By reporting out, naturally the mistakes made and the unethical decisions taken by companies will decrease as they don't want to be reported, and now people are not afraid to whistleblow and speak out against it. For my secondary article, I chose Whistleblowing as a Failure of Organizational Ethics by James J. Fletcher, who is a PhD professor. So in the article, we see a registered nurse by the name of Barry Adams at New England Hospital, who reported on the poor practices and treatments of patients, which was caused by staffing cuts and cost containment measures. He then documented all these wrongdoings by the company and refused to perform certain unethical actions. Who was then fired by the company. He sued the hospital and then he won. And so the big main point that this article presents is organizational systems, that institutions are to blame for whistleblowing issues, that we should have systems in place to allow employees to voice their concerns. Lastly, he presents that whistleblowing as a last resort, that whistleblowing is only to be used after we exhaust all these systems that are in place, and that it's sort of an external form of reporting out. Another point that it brings up is that of a clash of personal values, and that it is difficult to whistleblow. Sometimes we may be loyal to the company, but we also may be loyal to providing honest results and treatment to the public, and this clash of values makes it difficult for us to whistleblow. And the last thing it presents is that we need to have a moral justification to whistleblow. There needs to be some sort of recognition of unsolved issue. Despite us voicing our concerns, we need to investigate this claim thoroughly, and we need to find evidence that supports this claim fully. And that we need to have loyalty to the client, and that we're reporting in order to benefit the client, and that we take full responsibility for our actions. And finally, some of the arguments supported by this article that tend to show up in the first article as well, is that sufficient data is needed, that we need a lot of data in order to make a valid claim to begin with. The next one being that the negative outcomes that come out can be very extreme, as they list in this article as well. Harassment, blacklisted, and even in some extreme cases, suicide happen to occur as a result of whistleblowing. And then another argument that shows up is the weighing of pros and cons, that we need to weigh whether or not this whistleblowing will accurately help the client, or whether it won't. And then finally, that it is an institutional issue, that institutions should already have systems in place to help us voice our concerns, and we shouldn't have to go to external extents to report them. So that is my article. Thank you for watching. Have a great day.